Hello, my creative friends. I'm glad you're taking another art break today. For those of you who might be new, my name is Melanie, and I'm glad you're here. Today, I'm going to be showing you a step-by-step tutorial of how to create this pretty little watercolor hummingbird, and it's a sweet little drawing. It may look a little complicated, the watercolor steps, but it really isn't. If you can pop and drop some watercolor and water on your picture, you're going to be able to do this one. Well, first, I'm going to show you the drawing steps, and then I'm going to break it down to the watercolor steps. So for those of you who might want to have a little help drawing, I do have a Ko-fi page. This is like a Patreon page. It's a small little membership that you can join, and there you're going to find my line drawings for all of the drawings that I do on my YouTube channel. Here is the hummingbird drawing. This is what you would get. You can download this easily on your home computer, or if you have access to a library, you can easily do that as well. It's easy to find, simple to join, and very reasonably priced to do it. So let's go ahead and start with the drawing skills. I'm going to break down the steps, and then you can follow along, or you can do the line drawing. It does make quick, it does quite do a quick thing of doing a drawing, but I do believe that drawing is for everybody. It's not just for some, and the more you practice the skill, the better you're going to get. So I always encourage everyone to try drawing if you'd like to try drawing. So I'm going to put me up here in the corner so we can follow along. Let's break down the steps into some easy shapes. Now I'm going to be working on watercolor paper in the end. 140-pound Canson watercolor is my favorite kind of watercolor to use, but I'm going to be showing you on this copy paper. Well, let's break down the shape. It's kind of like, I'm going to call it a bowling pin. If you think of it as being a little bit wider, comes out this way and down, we're going to have a branch that comes down here midway, a little bit lower than midway between my bird body. And the thing about the hummingbird, of course, we're going to have this long beak that's on the bird, so that's going to give it more of a characteristic of a hummingbird. It's a smaller bird, so my head's not going to be super large, my body's not going to be super large, and his tail isn't very long as well. But let's go ahead and start with doing some of the drawing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my branch in first, so that gives me an idea of where I would like to have my feet. I'm just going to do a gentle little slope of the branch coming across. And then I'm just going to do two little squares or rectangles for my feet. So I know that's where my little feet are going to be. And let's take a look here at my body now. If I look here, here was my feet. I'm going to be going up, curving around. He is facing a little sideways, so he's going to have a little bit more of a flatter-ish style here, and then come up and then curve around. But we can start it first with our body. So I know I'm going to be on each side of my feet. I'm going to come down a little bit lower because this is going to be the lower part of my little body. And then I'm going to be coming in, and I'm going to drop down and make that V for my tail. It's not a real long tail, and he's sitting, so it's closed. So there's my little V there. Now let's go ahead and put the top part up. So this is where I'm going to make that bowling pin shape. So I'm going to come in for the side of my bowling pin, let's say, and then come up and around. So I'm going to make a head shape here. I'm using these little sketchy movements for my hand. That way helps me draw the shape easier, and I'm not going to be locked in necessarily right away to my shape. Okay, I'm going to curve it in just a little bit more on my back. Do you see how it's curved in a little bit more here? So I'm going to curve it out this way here, make this a little bit more rounded, come up with my head this direction, and then come around. Now this is where we're going to lay in our beak, and he's looking kind of up, so it's going to have a little bit of an angle. I'm going to start with my beak about how long I want it, and I'm just guessing whatever I think might make my hummingbird look like a hummingbird. Now that's my longest point. I'm going to do a little V here. So I'm coming in a little ways on my face. It's not sitting on the outside right there. Can you see how it's coming in just a little ways here? That's going to help it look like the head is actually turning, the beak is a part of the body, and it's not just sitting right on the top or the outside. Or like a snowman bird, we like to call that shape. Now I have this little V here, and then I'm going to be tapering it in as I go back and making it that little tiny long little bit of a beak. like so. Now you might have to adjust the size of this. If you think you would like to have it a little bit smaller, you might have to play with that a little bit. Now wherever my center of my beak is, the line for my center would travel a little ways out, and my eye is going to sit right on the top of this part here. So I can start with a round circle like that, and then I can go around my eye to create a little bit of a white area and touch the top of my eye. I'm making it very fanciful. I really don't know if a hummingbird looks this way, but I'm guessing. But that's about where we would put our eye. So we have our beak, the center line's coming out, the eye is going to be right above it. It's going to be closer to that beak, not sitting too far out. That will just give it a little bit of a bird look. Now let's change the shape of my face here now that I've got this on. If we take a look here, you can see how it's kind of curved in a little bit and out to connect with my beak. That's going to give it a little bit more look like my head is connected on, or my beak is connected onto my head. And then we're going to kind of elongate this shape right here just a tiny bit. Change it into more looking like a bird. Take a look at the back of your head. I gotta still make my back a little bit thicker. This one isn't quite as chubby. If you see my distance here, I've got a little bit more thickness to my bird to give it more of the back since it's looking sideways. That looks a little better. And I think I'm going to make my tail a little bit thicker as well. This is going to be one of those gradual steps that you're going to look at it. Does it look right? How can I change it? You might need to change the shape of your head, or you might need to change the front of the part here, or you might need to change the back, or you might need to change the size of your beak. Maybe I need to make this a little bit narrower and not as wide. Maybe it was looking too big. So there's going to be some subtle adjustments like that. So take a little bit of time, draw, and oh, that looks so much better to have a smaller little beak right there. Bill, beak, that's what I want to say. A smaller end here. It doesn't look so big. That made a big difference in the look of my bird. Now we have this part drawn. Now we're just going to be doing some simple little leaf work. I call these little footballs, where the tip is here and there's going to be a belly in the middle and then it ends with a tip. That's how I usually make my leaves. And then these are just little, well, kind of like little grape flowers. I just made them up. I figured it looks pretty with my bird, so I just added those on there. And that's what the drawing elements are. Well, let's go ahead and work on the watercolor. So we're going to be breaking down that step next. I've already have mine drawn here, and we're going to be working on the watercolor step next. I'm going to switch out the picture, and we'll begin that part. The first step for the watercolor look is I'm going to be working on the body of my bird. I'm going to put some clean water just inside of the bird. Now I have already done the eye in my micron pen, and I did that mostly for camera view so that you would be able to see my bird already on there to be able to make the shape out a little better. It just helps for you to see what I'm doing. You could do the eye after, or you could do it right away. It doesn't really matter. But I wanted to be able to show you what the bird, where it's kind of more centered, because I did erase my pencil lines a little bit with my kneaded eraser to soften and lighten my pencil lines. That's a great little tool to have, is those little kneaded erasers. Now for my bird, I'm going to be starting light at the top and then working my way down. So the way that I did mine on this one is I started with some golden yellow. So I'm going to be starting with this bright color, kind of a yellow, bright yellow. Now my paper is wet underneath there, and I'm just going to be tapping in a little bit of that color right there. Now I moved down to a little bit of this bright green. So I'm going to take some of this green and I'm going to tap that in there. Now this is a good choice because the green and the yellow, if they blend into each other, they're not going to create mud because they will play nice to each other. And as long as they're next to each other or on the color wheel, that same kind of tone, they're not going to create mud. So now that's why I started with this bright orange next over here. So I just came in, my paper's still wet. I can see the water glistening on the top. And I'm going to pop in a little bit of this bright orange And I'm going to carry it a little bit below. Okay, now the next color I'm going to be doing is this purple. Now the purple and the orange might create a little bit of brown, but I'm okay with that look. I'm going to start over here a little bit. I'm okay with that look because I don't mind the look, because as I'm blending down to my tail, I'm going to be getting darker. So I'm going to be popping some of this bright purple in here. It's kind of divided by the branch, so I have a little bit of room to play. Because my branch was dry, my watercolor is not going to go into that area. Okay, and then I'm going to pick up a little bit more of this bright orange, tap a little bit in there. Now you might be noticing my colors are going to start to change as they blend here, but I'm okay with that. Now I'm going to be working down here. It's starting to dry. I can see that the glisten area is starting to soften and I don't see it as shiny. So I'm going to start adding a little bit more water. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Gray, which is that bluish color. And I'm going to tap that in right at the bottom of my tail. Now the blue and the orange might mix together and make a dark color, but I'm okay with that. Now while this is, I'm going to let this dry just a tiny bit, and then I'm going to be adding a little bit more contrast in here. This is starting to sit. I could see where my color isn't blending too well. I'm going to want to tap it a little bit so my colors are blending together a little bit more. Now watercolor is going to dry lighter as it's sitting and drying, so keep that in mind. You may end up having to glaze over it again, and you may notice that, oh, I want a little bit more color on my bird, so I'm going to be popping in just a tiny bit more here. Maybe pick up a little bit more of my green, add that in there. Okay, let's let those kind of sit and play with the colorations and see what we end up. If you feel like you want to, because it's feeling like it's a little too divided here, like I have a top and a bottom of a bird, I'm going to go ahead and top a little bit of this purple up here, so I'm not feeling like I'm just completely cutting off my picture, that the bottom is so different than the top. Now this might get a little muddy, but it might get a little dark, but I'm okay with that look too. I'm adding a little bit more water to this to kind of push my color around a little bit. And that's helping to connect my picture. So it's not so divided where my colors don't look like they're so separate from each other. Like the body isn't connected, the top isn't connected from the bottom. That looks good. And I'm going to take a little bit of this darker color, this brown that I have here, and I'm going to tap just a tiny bit of it at the top. And I'm going to be adding a little bit of shadow, see where it's going to go or follow, and perhaps even a little bit here on the outside. And remember, because my paper isn't wet on this side, it's not going to travel over there. It's only going to be traveling where the areas are wet. And let's come in here and tap in a little bit more here just to kind of round out my areas. I'm liking that look. I'm going to travel down here as well. And let's darken up that tail just a little bit. The blue looks good, but I think I want to add just a little bit of darker color to it. This is an umber color that I'm adding, and I'm going to tap in some of that color. My colors are still pretty wet, so it still should be doing some of that watercolor magic where the colors will blend on their own and make their own patterns without me doing a lot of work. So let's take a look. Now, if you're noticing any harsh lines developing, you can always come back in and drop in a little bit more clean water in those areas, just a little bit, and soften up or help move that color around. Now you can see here where my color is kind of crossing over into my branch, but it's going to be okay because once I get my branch painted in there, it's going to connect those two areas. Let's hold this up just a little bit higher so you can take a look of what's happening there and how the colors are blending. Hopefully the camera picks that up. All right, let's go ahead and work a little bit on the leaves. Now I'm just looking at creating a couple different shades of green. So whatever color I have over here dried in my pan, I'm most likely going to pick that up. And I'm going to be starting light and bright and then working my way to a darker shade of green, and maybe even add a little bit of yellow from what I have over here. So I'm just going to be laying in the colors. Now I might be speeding this up a little bit as I move through this part. And if there's something I need to want to pop in and explain a little bit more, I'll do that. But you can watch or paint along with me on this step. It does look good on these steps to have a variety of greens and intensity of greens. So more water you add, the more translucent your color will be, and that's going to give that leaf, when it dries, a different look completely than more color on it. And if you have a variety of greens, that's just going to really add a nice look to your painting, and it's going to change it up so that it doesn't all look the same. So it's drying really well. And I might have to go in and add my hair dryer just to speed this up a little bit so that it can dry. I want to make sure it's dry before I go in and add my branch, because I don't want that color to move too much into my bird. And I definitely want to give my beak a chance, or this area here, a chance to dry before I were to add the beak. Give it a little chance to dry, and now I'm going to be coming in with even a smaller brush, and I'm going to be connecting some of these leaves here by adding a few little stems with the smaller brush just to connect it to my branch. I'm also going to be adding this little berry cluster that I had on my first one, and what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to start out with just a kind of a grape cluster size of water that's coming down, and I'm breaking up my puddle a little bit so it's not so solid. And then I'm going to be choosing some colors just to pop in. I'm going to use some of the colors that I used on my bird just to bring it together. I'm going to start light and bright and then work my way darker. So this is going to be that brighter orange, bright yellow orange, Indian yellow. And then I'm going to be popping in a little bit of that bright color orange, and maybe just add it just with the tip of my brush as I'm coming down. Now again, I'm going to give this a chance to dry before I come in and add a few more details to that area. While that's drying, I'm going to work on my beak. And to work on my beak, I'm going to turn my paper just a little bit so I have a little bit better pull line on what I'm working on, because this is such a fine area. I'm going to use this small little brush. Use a small one that you have, and I'm just going to be adding in a watery look of the brown, bringing it back. And I'm going to be trying to leave a slight little highlight in the end. Now you can do some of this work too with your micron pen and not have to totally rely on your watercolor skills or your brush skills completely. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be leaving in, I want to leave a little bit of a white highlight. So I'm going to come on this side. And if you lose all of the white highlight, you could also come back in and work it in with your Uniball pen. And that might just be easier too if you don't want to do it all with your brush. I don't have very good, small, tiny little detail brushes. Now this one here, I can tell I'm going to be wanting to get a little bit cozier up there with this color because I want my beak to look like it's more connected. I'm going to just drop in a little bit more green up here. You can see my color did dull a little bit, but I can come in and I can glaze in a little bit more color and still keep that look. So I'm going to use my bright colors again. But I do like that dark color, that edge that came about there. So I don't want to lose that. And I'm going to be dropping in a little bit more bright, maybe around his eye. And I'm thinking I'm going to be dropping in, but I do love that color. I don't want to lose it. I'm going to tap in a little bit more orange, maybe on his back here, just to give that more of a shadow, and pick up a little bit more of that darker color from I used on his beak. I'm going to tap a little bit of that on his back just to add a shadow. Let's work a little bit more on that branch. So I'm going to be picking up a darker color again. This is my umber color. You could mix a little bit of red brown in there if you would like to. Just a nice watered down brown. Again, I'm using a small brush here, and I'm going to come in and drag a line across. This is where my bird is going to kind of get connected there. You'd see some of that between his toes. And again, if you wanted to add a little highlight on this, you could add that with your Uniball pen. With this one here, your Uniball white ink, that's a great one to add a little bit of white line. I'm going to come in and add just a tiny bit more darkness to it, like on the underside here, just to darken and give it a shadow underneath there on the underside. Perfect. Looking beautiful. Now this is a time you can decide, do you want to darken up your greens a little bit? Do you have enough variation? Are you happy with that? I think I'm going to darken up some of them just a little bit more, maybe right here at the base lines, just to give my leaves even a little bit more character and depth to my drawing. I am going to be adding some pen and ink work to the end. You know I like my pen and ink work. If you would like to do glitter pens, gel pens, anything like that, colored pencils, if you're going to use the colored pencils, I was going to remember that or mention that this time, is that you might want to look into using a mixed media paper to do your paintings on, because mixed media paper will be smoother than your watercolor paint, and you might be happier with that look. Now I'm going to come in and take a little bit of red, a little bit brighter shade of this red. I haven't used it yet. And I'm going to be adding just a few kind of roundish balls of this color. And then I might go back in and add a little bit of water over the top of them to bring them a little bit softer, and maybe even a little bit of my purple that I used on my bird to add a little bit of that color as well. I wanted to try to create just a little bit of a more of a berry look to it, a little bit more round definition of that these might be berries that are hanging from my tree. Let's take a little bit of water and add just maybe a few dots of water to soften some of those marks. I'm thinking I'm liking that. I think that looks good. Let's do a little bit of washy background on this. Now, I didn't do a lot of background on there. I just did some simple little washes. I chose like this brown color that I had used on my original, like on some of the twig area, and I washed that color over. And I might want to pick up a bigger brush to do this with. Just a little bit, even maybe a little bit of that Payne's gray would be pretty too in the background. Let's see if I can find my Payne's gray here, but I want to definitely wash it down. I don't want a lot of competition for between my bird and my background. This one's going to be a little darker than my original one, but that's okay. They all can be different and look a little different. But I want my bird to be the center story of this painting. So I'm going to definitely wash it out. I'm going to be doing a little bit of light splitter splatters. Okay, let's take a little bit of this darker color here. Whoa, way too much color. Definitely want to add some water to that. And let's do a few, let's do a few sprinkles and adding it onto the back. Now, since I used the Payne's gray on this one, I'm going to use that Payne's gray for some of my sprinkles too. And the blue. The other one I did some oranges in there, and I like that look too. But I like this look as well. The blue and the brown looks good. This one is like the oranges a little bit with the brown, which I think looks great. I'm going to give this a dry, and when I come back, we can do the pen work. It's fairly dry. I'm going to come in and do a little bit of my sketchy pen work. I don't want to totally outline my piece because I'm loving how the colors dry on the edge. Do you see the irregular edges? I really love that look. So I don't want to completely line my piece in. I'm going to use my one. I'm going to move quick and fast and sketchy. I'm not trying to follow exact. And I'm going to be creating a little bit of multiple line work, and I'm not going to be going everywhere. And that's the look I want to do to try to keep that real kind of sketch look. So you can see I'm not being very perfect with my pen work. I'm going to change my direction sideways here so I can get that beak, and I'm going to continue on with that light little bit of sketch work. There, that looks great. Let's add a tiny bit line here in the middle. Give a separation to my beak. And for his toes, I'm going to be doing those just in my marker, my pen this time, and see if I like that look. Last time I did kind of wash them in a little bit with watercolor, and you could do that. I could do a little pen work, let it dry, and then come in with my pen. I could do that, but I think this time I'm just going to leave it, the pen, and I'm going to be working on the bottom here for my line, and again doing very irregular look. And for my leaves, I want that real loose look again, going past where, or even past my watercolor lines, not worrying about being exact, and creating that real loose sketch look of imperfection. That's my jam. Now, if you like to have more perfect drawing, you could do that. And if that's what makes your heart happy, you work on doing that. Or if you want to even do more gel pen work or colored pencil, this is where you could add a little bit more interest in your painting and make it more of a mixed media painting. Or if you're happy with just the watercolor, you leave it a watercolor. So whatever might make you think, whatever you like, and experiment with more than one too. This little bird doesn't take that much time to do. And especially if you do a tracer, like I love using a light box. So once I have my drawing completed, I make a tracer of it. So if I want to do it again multiple times, I can quickly do a tracer of it and then copy it from my light box and have the drawing steps done, or refine my drawing. After doing it once, I can come back in and refine it a little bit and change it that way. And then I don't have to completely draw it over, especially if it's a more complicated drawing. This little guy doesn't take long to paint or draw. It's a super fun little quick little sketch. Now I'm coming in here and doing a little bit of scribbling with my Uniball pen. If you needed to, brighten up your eye a little bit with this white ink, it works perfect for that. If you wanted to add a little bit of highlight on the top of this branch, it works great for that. If you wanted to add just even a little bit of, maybe a little tiny little scribble bits on the top of your bird. And it all came together. I'm thinking I'm going to want to sign it in pencil, if I can find my pencil. This is where I have so many things out, I can never find what I'm looking for. Let's see if this one, I can get it to work. There we go. I'm going to sign my work. I'm thinking I'm going to sign it here by my bird. I like signing in pencil. There. I think that looks good. And I think that's a great little painting. It's really got a fun look to it. That drop and plop, I like to call it. This is my original one. So they never look exactly the same, but they look similar. They look very similar. And that one is, I'm going to call it a wrap. I'm hoping that you enjoy doing this one. If you are new to my page and you haven't subscribed yet and you might like doing all the art things, come on over. I do weekly tutorials. Consider subscribing. I'd love to have new creative friends join me. Go ahead and hit the bell to get notifications from YouTube. And if you found this and you like this drawing, give me a thumbs up. YouTube loves a thumbs up, and plus it really does help get my channel out there, and I appreciate everyone doing so. Drop me a comment. Let me know what you think of this little guy. You have a great rest of your week. I'll be back again doing another tutorial over the weekend. So thanks so much for hanging out with me today and taking a break, and hopefully you'll come back with me and create again.